The man no one recognized. The sky outside was a dull gray, the kind that made everything feel heavier, like the world was holding its breath. A soft drizzle tapped against the boutique windows, coating the glass in a blur of motion and light. Inside, the store was warm and flawless, clean lines, golden fixtures, mirrors that made everyone look just a little more polished. Everything about the boutique was curated, hand-picked from international designers, each item priced high enough to keep out the noise of the everyday world. Behind the counter stood Amelia, composed and sharp. Her name tag sat perfectly straight, on the lapel of her navy blazer, and not a single strand of her chestnut hair was out of place. She had worked hard to get this job. For her, the boutique wasn't just a paycheck. It was her way of standing above the life she'd come from. The small apartment, the nights waiting tables, the father in the hospital bed. Here, she could pretend she had always belonged. At exactly 9:07 a.m., the door opened with a soft chime. He stepped in quietly, unnoticed at first. His boots were worn, the soles dark with water from the rain. His coat hung loosely, dust clinging to the hem. A plain black beanie sat on his head, and his face was partly hidden beneath an unshaven beard. He didn't walk like someone in a rush. There was calm in every step, as if he carried all the time in the world. Amelia glanced up and in one look made a judgment. He didn't belong. She'd seen his kind before, wanderers, browsers, men who walked through the store just to feel expensive fabric, then left without buying a thing. She waited for him to drift, then disappear. But he didn't. Instead, he walked slowly along the shelves, his fingers brushing the edge of a cashmere scarf with a kind of reverence. His eyes weren't hurried. They studied, understood, appreciated. He moved like someone searching for meaning, not a discount. Amelia watched him carefully. When he stopped near a display of tailored jackets, she stepped forward. "Sir?" she said, voice polite but clipped. "Those items are quite delicate. Please be careful." He turned. His eyes were warm, not offended. "Of course," he replied. "I was just admiring the stitching. The pattern's subtle, but it's beautiful." Amelia tilted her head slightly. "Yes, well, that jacket is hand-stitched in Florence. The price reflects the work. Are you looking for something specific?" He smiled gently. "Not really, just looking." A few other customers were in the store, two women laughing softly near the handbags, a man sipping espresso as he examined watches. None of them paid attention to the man in the dusty coat, but Amelia did. When he moved to the watches, she followed. "These are limited edition pieces," she said. "We usually recommend serious buyers schedule a private appointment." Raised an eyebrow but kept his tone kind. "Good to know. I just thought this one looked familiar." "Is it based on the Hiroshi design from '93? She blinked, caught off guard. "You know that design?" He nodded. "My friend once wore it to a film premiere. Had a brushed steel band, same angled dial." Amelia's mouth opened slightly. "Right. Well, we don't usually get customers who remember old watches," he finished, with a soft chuckle. "Who dress like this," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. His smile didn't fade, but he stepped back. "Ah, of course." There was no anger in his voice, just something quieter, something that sounded like disappointment. Amelia flushed. "I didn't mean that how it sounded." "How did you mean it?" he asked, still kind, still steady. She looked away. He nodded again. "No worries." He wandered back toward the corner of the store where an old bookshelf stood more for decoration than purpose. There, he picked out a book on classic tailoring and sat in a chair no customer had ever used. He opened it slowly, carefully, and began to read. Minutes passed. Then 20. Amelia busied herself at the counter, but her eyes kept drifting to him. There was something off, not in a bad way, but in a curious one. The way he sat, the way he read, like he had nothing to prove, like he belonged more than anyone else who'd ever walked in. And then, just as quietly as he had come in, the boutique door opened again. A man in a charcoal suit entered, his steps sharp and precise. He spotted the man in the chair instantly and hurried over. "Sir," he said, bowing slightly, "I'm so sorry we weren't expecting you today." Amelia froze. The man in the chair looked up and gently closed the book. "I like to come in quietly," he said. "Helps me see what's really going on." The man in the suit nodded nervously. "Of course. Should I call the staff together?" He shook his head. "No need." Then he turned to Amelia. "Thank you," he said softly. "You were honest." Her face went pale. "Wait, who are you?" The suited man looked at her. "That's Mr. Reeves," he said. "He owns this place." Amelia's knees almost buckled. The man in the dusty coat stepped closer to her now, his eyes not angry, just searching. "This store," he said gently, "was built to feel like a place where anyone could walk in and feel respected. Not because they looked rich, but because they're human." She could barely speak. I didn't know." "I know," he replied. He looked around once more, took a slow breath, and turned toward the door. But just before leaving, he paused and said one last thing. "I'll be back," he said. "Next time, maybe I'll wear something fancy. Or maybe I won't. We'll see." And with that, he walked out, the bell chiming softly behind him. Amelia stood frozen, her face burning, her heart racing. The boutique had never felt quieter, but the story had only just begun. The apology no one heard. The night after Keanu Reeves walked out of the boutique, the silence he left behind refused to fade. Amelia couldn't sleep. Not because she feared losing her job, though that thought gnawed at her, but because something inside her had shifted. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the way he had looked at her, not with anger, not with superiority, but with quiet disappointment. It was that gentle, almost fatherly tone. This place was built to make people feel seen, not judged. That left the heaviest mark. She sat on the edge of her bed at 2:14 in the morning, staring at the city lights outside her small apartment window. Her fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to send a message to the store's internal group chat, maybe to explain herself, maybe to soften the story before it spread. But what would she say? "I judged a man because of his clothes. I shamed a stranger who turned out to be the one signing my checks." There was no shortcut to cleaning a wound like that. And deep down, Amelia knew this wasn't about a job. It was about the kind of person she had allowed herself to become. Someone who measured people by their appearance. Someone who forgot that kindness wasn't part of the uniform. It was supposed to be part of the heart. The next morning, she arrived at the store before the sun had even risen. The streets were still mostly empty, except for a few early joggers and a man sweeping leaves in front of the flower shop across the street. She unlocked the boutique's glass doors with shaking hands. The scent of sandalwood hit her like a memory, and everything inside looked exactly the same, but it felt different. She moved through the store slowly, running her fingers across displays just as Keanu had the day before. She sat in the same chair he had chosen, by the dusty bookshelf. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't check her reflection in the mirror or her messages for morning updates. She just sat there, quiet, thinking. By the time the rest of the staff arrived, she was already back behind the counter. But the way she greeted them was different, less rehearsed, more real. She looked people in the eye. She asked how their families were. She even noticed Jason, the quiet part-timer, struggling to carry a stack of new arrivals, and helped him without being asked. No one commented on it, but a few eyebrows were raised. It wasn't like her. Not before. By noon, business was steady. A few regulars came in, a young couple browsing for engagement gifts, and an elderly woman looking for a soft scarf to match her lavender coat. Amelia helped them all, not with practiced charm, but with something that felt almost like sincerity. But the moment she had been dreading came when a black car pulled up to the curb again. This time, Keanu didn't walk in alone. He entered with a woman at his side. She was older, with silver hair pulled into a low bun and a smile that carried stories. Her clothes were simple but elegant, and when she looked around the boutique, her eyes glowed with the kind of wonder that had nothing to do with money. Amelia froze. Keanu caught her glance and nodded once, the same quiet smile on his lips as before. He didn't look angry. He looked patient, and that somehow made everything harder. The woman admired a deep green dress hanging near the window. She touched the fabric gently, then turned to Keanu. "This one reminds me of the dress I wore to your first movie premiere," she said, her voice warm with memory. "I remember," Keanu replied softly. "You wore it better than any actress on that carpet." The woman laughed, a sound so full of life that it made the other customers smile without knowing why. Amelia stepped forward, her voice catching in her throat. "Good afternoon," she managed. "Is there anything I can help with today?" Keanu looked at her. The moment hung between them, heavy and fragile. "This is Mrs. Peters," he said. "She used to be my English teacher. When I was just a kid in Toronto, she told me that no matter how poor you look, you should always walk with the pride of who you are." Mrs. Peters chuckled. "And now he brings me here once a year to remind me that dreams do come true." Keanu turned back to Amelia. "She wanted to pick a dress for her great-granddaughter's birthday." Amelia swallowed hard. "Of course, I'll show you some of our finest pieces." They moved through the racks together, and for the first time, Amelia felt like she wasn't selling anything. She was helping someone choose a memory. Mrs. Peters asked her opinion on colors and sleeves, and she answered with care. The old woman's eyes sparkled every time she smiled, and something about her presence softened every corner of the boutique. When Mrs. Peters went into the changing room to try on a dress, Amelia turned to Keanu. "I want to apologize," she said, her voice low, "for yesterday, for assuming, for speaking to you like that." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "What made you change?" She hesitated. "You did, not because of who you are, but because of how you made me feel without saying anything cruel. I thought I was someone who treated people fairly, but yesterday I realized I've been performing kindness, not living it." Keanu nodded. "That kind of honesty takes courage." She looked down, embarrassed. "I don't know if it's enough." "It never is," he said gently, "until you start doing it again, every day." Mrs. Peters emerged from the changing room, twirling slowly in a powder blue dress that shimmered softly under the boutique lights. Keanu clapped his hands, genuinely delighted. "You look like the queen of every happy ending," he said. Mrs. Peters laughed, her cheeks blushing. "Then I'll take it." Keanu pulled out a black card and handed it to Amelia. She looked at it, stunned. It had no visible name, but she recognized the weight of it. Only a few existed in the world. "Put it on my account," he said. "And include a gift bag with a handwritten note from the staff, something kind. She likes words more than ribbons." Amelia nodded slowly. "Yes, of course." But just as Keanu and Mrs. Peters prepared to leave, another customer entered. A man in his 50s, dressed in a flashy suit, sunglasses on indoors. He didn't look around. He walked straight up to Keanu, his tone sharp and impatient. "R.E. You done browsing, buddy? Some of us are here to spend real money." The entire boutique went silent. Amelia's heart dropped. Keanu turned slowly, calmly. "I'm done," he said. "But maybe you should browse a little longer. See if you can find your manners," the man snorted. "Do you even know who I am?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Not yet." And then he turned to leave, holding the boutique door open for Mrs. Peters, who walked past the man with a gracious smile that seemed to carry far more weight than any insult. The moment they stepped outside, The store felt different again. But the story wasn't over, not even close, because that man in the flashy suit, he was about to make a mistake far bigger than just a rude comment. And next time, there would be more than quiet disappointment waiting for him. The suit that didn't fit the soul, the man with the flashy suit, whose entrance had soured the air in the boutique, was named Colin Hart. He wasn't a stranger to expensive places or the way people bowed their heads to him when he waved his platinum card. He made his fortune in corporate real estate, buying buildings, raising rents, selling the dreams of others to the highest bidder. His name opened doors. His money silenced questions. And for people like him, every moment in a place like this was another performance to remind the world how important he was. But what Colin didn't realize, what most like him rarely did, was that power spoken too loudly starts to sound like desperation. After Keanu and Mrs. Peters left, Colin wandered the boutique like a king inspecting his castle. He ran his fingers across fabrics he didn't understand, lifted price tags as if they were trophies, and tossed jackets back on racks, without care. Every step he took seemed louder than necessary. Every laugh a little too forced. He walked straight up to the counter where Amelia was still trying to steady her thoughts. "So," he said, leaning an elbow on the polished wood, "what's the most expensive suit in this place?" Amelia took a breath, her tone polite. "We have a handcrafted three-piece by Vasari in the back room. Pure wool blend with Italian silk lining. Limited edition," Colin smirked. "Perfect. Bring it out." As she turned to fetch it, he added, "And no offense, but you shouldn't let guys like that hang around in here." He looked like he just crawled out of a basement. Her steps faltered. She said nothing. But inside her, something cracked. She brought the suit forward gently, laying it on the counter with care. The stitching caught the light in a quiet, elegant way. Not loud, not showy. It was the kind of craftsmanship that spoke only to those who knew how to listen. "This is it," she said. "Tailored for discretion. It doesn't shout, it whispers." Colin scoffed. "Good. I'll try it on. If it fits, I'll buy two, maybe one in navy." As he disappeared into the changing room, Jason, the quiet part-timer, stepped beside Amelia, eyes wide. "Did you see how Mr. Reeves handled him?" he whispered. "He didn't even raise his voice. It was like he didn't need to." Amelia nodded slowly. "Because he didn't." She looked toward the door, where Mrs. Peters had smiled so kindly, where Keanu had walked out like the calm before a storm. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't just a moment. This was the beginning of something bigger. Colin emerged. From the changing room, the suit stretched uncomfortably across his chest. He turned, inspecting himself in the mirror, clearly unimpressed. "Doesn't feel right," he muttered. "Must be the cut. Or the lighting." Amelia looked at him carefully. "It's not the suit." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Some things are made to fit character," she said quietly. "Not ego." He stared at her for a moment, trying to decide if she was insulting him, but he waved it off. "Fine. Send it to my assistant. Charge whatever you want." He pulled out his card and slid it across the counter, and then the doors opened again. This time, a man in a maintenance uniform stepped in, early 40s, dark eyes, rough hands. His face was tense, his jacket damp with sweat. He walked straight to Amelia. "Sorry," he said, voice urgent. "I was told the owner is here. Is he still around?" Amelia hesitated. "You just missed him. Is something wrong?" The man looked embarrassed. "He was supposed to sign off on a renovation permit. It's about the shelter down on Greystone, the one for women and kids. We're building new bathrooms, but the city won't approve the next phase without his signature." Colin raised an eyebrow. "A shelter? In this part of town?" The man glanced at him but said nothing. Amelia looked at him. "Who told you to come here?" "His assistant." "She said if we couldn't reach him through email, just show up. He doesn't ignore people face to face." "He doesn't," Amelia said, more to herself than to anyone. Colin chuckled. Hold on. That guy is involved in shelters. No way he owns this place. Come on, I've met billionaires. They don't walk around in mud boots reading old books. Maintenance worker's eyes narrowed. Then you haven't met the right kind. And with that, he left as quietly as he came. Colin shook his head. This city's full of weirdos. Amelia didn't reply. She went back to her work, but every word spoken that afternoon burned a little longer in her chest. Jason quietly folded. Clothes nearby, his eyes flicking between the door and the counter, as if waiting for another chapter to start. The next morning, the boutique received a large box, addressed simply to the boutique team. Inside was a note, handwritten on thick paper. Every place of business reflects the people within it. Keep it honest. Keep it kind. Below the note were 6 new staff coats, made of the same fabric as the Vassery suit, each one tailored with personalized initials stitched on the inner collar. Jason found his initials and gasped. I've never even owned a real coat before, he whispered, running his fingers across the soft lining. Amelia held hers carefully, the weight of it unfamiliar. Then she turned the tag over and saw something else stitched beneath her name. Seen, she stared at that single word for a long time. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was the loudest thing she'd ever worn. Just then, the phone at the front desk rang. She answered, her voice steady. Thank you for calling the boutique, she said. How may I help you? A woman's voice came through, polite but firm. This is Natalie, Mr. Reeves' assistant. He'd like to schedule a meeting with your full team tomorrow morning at 10 sharp. Amelia blinked. A meeting? Yes. He said it's time to have a conversation about what this boutique really stands for. And then the line clicked. The silence afterward was thick with tension, with hope, with fear, but mostly with anticipation. Because no one, not Colin, not Amelia, not Jason, was ready for what was about to be revealed. The secret beneath the showroom, the boutique, felt different the next morning. The polished floors gleamed just as brightly, and the scent of sandalwood still hung in the air, but something unspoken buzzed between the walls. It wasn't just anticipation, it was something deeper, maybe truth, rising to the surface after being buried too long. Every staff member stood straighter, wore their new coats with pride, but there was unease in their eyes. Not fear exactly, something more personal. It was as if they all sensed that today wouldn't just be another morning. It would be a mirror, held up to who they really were. Keanu Reeves arrived at exactly 10 o'clock, not a minute early, not a second late. He stepped through the glass doors alone, his coat still the same faded black, his boots worn at the edges. But something about him felt even larger than yesterday. Not in stature, but in presence, as if he carried more than just his name, like he carried the weight of a promise too many had forgotten. No one spoke when he walked in, not Amelia, not Jason. Even Colin, who had returned that morning out of curiosity and arrogance, stood by the jackets pretending to be interested, but his ears were sharply tuned to every word. Keanu walked to the center of the boutique and turned, slowly to face the staff. His voice, when he spoke, was soft, steady. Not the voice of a celebrity, but of someone who had seen the world break and still chose to believe in people. This boutique, he began, was never meant to be just a store. His eyes moved from one employee to the next. It was a test. A ripple moved through the room. Every piece we sell, every design on these walls, every conversation that happens here, it was always meant to reflect something more than wealth. This place was supposed to be about dignity, about connection, about proving that kindness could live even in places built for the powerful. He paused, and his gaze lingered on Amelia. But somewhere along the way, we started failing that test. Amelia lowered her eyes. The words struck like slow thunder. Most of the staff here were chosen not because of their resumes, but because of their stories, he continued. Because they came from hardship. Because they understood what it meant to be invisible. His voice broke slightly, just enough to stir emotion, not enough to lose control. And still, we began treating people the way we were once treated. He turned toward Jason. You were living in your car when we found your application. Jason's face flushed red. Yeah, I was. And yet you never judged a single person who walked through this door. Jason's eyes welled, and he nodded silently. Keanu's gaze turned back to Amelia. You, Amelia, you were once a waitress, juggling 2 jobs, caring for your father while going to night school. You knew the pain of being overlooked. She blinked, stunned. How do you know that? Because I make it a point to know the people who represent this place. And I believed you could turn that pain into empathy. She opened her mouth, but the words dissolved before they could form. Then Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out a thin leather folder. He laid it on the counter gently and opened it. Inside was a document, a letter with signatures and seals. A few lines in bold stood out, and when Colin stepped closer to read it, his face turned pale. Keanu looked at him now, his voice colder. And you, Colin Hart, he said. You weren't invited here. You bought your way in, not just as a customer, as a silent partner. 6 months ago, you convinced my business advisor to let you invest, without my approval, because you promised to expand our reach, make the boutique more profitable. But instead, you started turning it into what every other store already is. Soulless. Colin straightened. It's called business, Keanu. We can't run a charity in the fashion district. Keanu took a step forward. You think this was about charity? This boutique was my mother's dream. She worked 3 jobs as a seamstress so I could afford acting classes. She used to dream of a place where the poor could wear dignity like fabric, where everyone was treated like a person, not a transaction. His voice trembled now, but not with weakness. This boutique was the only piece of her I had left. Colin's eyes darted toward the exit. Look, I didn't know all that. I just wanted to help the business grow. By replacing kindness with quotas, by instructing staff to ignore customers who didn't look the part. By suggesting we stop allowing people from the local shelter to browse during off hours because they lowered the atmosphere. Gasps rose from the staff. Amelia turned sharply. He said that? Keanu nodded. And he blocked 2 renovation permits meant for shelters we support, including the one on Greystone. That's why the construction stopped. Jason's fists clenched. He made me believe we were out of funds. We weren't, Keanu said. He lied. Colin stepped back. You don't have proof. Keanu turned the folder around and laid another document on the counter. This one was an email chain. Highlighted lines. His assistant's signature. You've been removed as a partner as of this morning. The board reviewed everything. The boutique is mine again. Entirely. Colin stared at the papers. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. Instead, for the first time, he looked smaller than the room he stood in. He left without a word. When the door closed behind him, the silence he left behind felt cleansing. Keanu turned back to the staff. I won't pretend this place hasn't lost its way, but I believe we can build it back. Not by being perfect, but by being honest. Starting today, we'll reopen the doors to the shelters. We'll add a pay-what-you-can rack, and every staff member will have 1 afternoon a week to volunteer at any organization they choose, on the clock. He looked around at their stunned faces. If we can't change the world outside these walls, we can at least change the way people feel inside them. Amelia stepped forward. Her voice cracked. You don't have to keep me here. I failed. That test. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. The test isn't about whether you failed, he said softly. It's about what you do after you realize you did. And somehow those words felt like a hand pulling her from a deep well. She nodded. tears in her eyes. "Then I'd like to try again." And Keanu smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet relief. "Good," he said, "because tomorrow, the real work begins." But just as he said that, Jason's phone buzzed. He looked down, eyes widening. Guys," he said, holding up the screen. "There's a video of yesterday. Someone filmed Colin insulting Keanu. It's gone viral." Amelia leaned over to see it. The headline read, "Rich man insults kind stranger. Turns out he owns the building." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Well," he muttered, "I guess the city's watching now." But no one could guess how big that spotlight was about to get. When the world starts watching, the video spread like fire on dry leaves. By the end of the day, it had crossed 3 million views. By midnight, 10. News outlets picked it up with headlines soaked in drama. "Mystery man insulted in luxury store. Turns out to be owner and movie star." Followed by clips of Colin's arrogant remarks and Keanu's calm, unforgettable response. The footage was shaky, clearly taken from someone's phone, but the audio was sharp, the tension raw. It wasn't just a viral video. It was a mirror reflecting something deeper about judgment, humility, and what real power looks like. Outside the boutique the next morning, a small crowd had already gathered. Some came hoping to see Keanu. Others brought flowers, thank you notes, or simply curiosity. There were reporters with microphones, influencers posing for selfies near the door, and mothers holding the hands of young daughters whispering, "That's the store I told you about, the one where kindness won." It should have felt like a victory. It should have felt like the moment everyone had been waiting for. But inside the boutique, the mood was complicated. Keanu stood in the back office, staring at a tablet playing the video again. Not out of vanity, but out of quiet concern. Every word Colin had spoken, every insult was there, and so was his response. Gentle, unshaken, true. But what worried him wasn't how he came across. It was what came next. Amelia knocked once before stepping in. "They're asking for interviews. Every major outlet. Even morning shows." Keanu didn't turn away from the screen. That's not what this place was built for. "But it might help the mission," she offered carefully. "We could share your mother's story. The shelter projects. Everything you've been trying to do quietly." He looked up slowly. "And turn this into a brand?" "Maybe," she said, her voice soft. "Or maybe a lesson." He didn't answer right away. His mind was elsewhere, drifting through old memories of his mother sewing late into the night, of watching her hands work through pain and exhaustion just to make a collar lie straight or a stitch hold. She never wanted applause. She wanted dignity. And now, her dream sat on a stage with the whole world watching. When he finally stepped out front, the staff gathered quickly. Jason held a cup of tea with both hands, nervously shifting his weight. Marie, the senior tailor, stood silent but alert, always more comfortable with fabric than with feelings. Even customers browsing paused and looked up. The room became still. "You've probably all seen the video," Keanu began, his voice steady. "And now, the outside world wants in." He took a slow breath. "I never wanted this to be about me. The boutique was supposed to be a sanctuary, a quiet kind of rebellion against what the fashion world forgot, that people matter more than labels. But now, people are listening, and maybe that's something we shouldn't run from." He scanned their faces, pausing on Jason. "We're going to start telling the truth, about where we came from, about why this place exists. No more secrecy. No more quiet." A ripple of emotion moved through the room. "Starting next week," Keanu continued, "we'll host a weekly open forum here. Anyone can come in, share their story, try on clothes they never thought they could afford, and walk out with dignity, no charge, no cameras, no sign-ups, just heart." The staff exchanged stunned looks. Jason blinked fast, trying not to cry, but then came the twist no one saw coming. Keanu turned to Amelia, his voice lower now. "And in order to protect this space, I'm stepping away for a while." A stunned silence fell. Amelia's breath caught. "What do you mean, stepping away?" "The story's too focused on me now," he said. "People are forgetting what the boutique is really about. If I stay, it becomes about fame, not purpose." Jason's voice cracked. "But you are the purpose." Keanu smiled sadly. "No, the people are. And if this place can't stand without my name, then it never truly stood for anything." Amelia stepped forward. "You're going to disappear again?" He nodded. "I've left a leadership plan. You'll guide it. All of you. Together. I'll still be watching, helping from the shadows, but not in the spotlight." "What if we fail?" she asked. "Then fail with kindness," he replied, "and rise with grace." And just like that, the decision was made. By the time the sun began to set, a statement was released. It was handwritten, posted on the boutique's door and across its website. "We are not a store. We are a second chance, dressed in fabric. We are not for everyone. We are for anyone who has ever been overlooked." Signed only with a small K, the IT. Media buzzed for hours, asking why he would walk away. Why now? Some praised it. Others questioned it. But for those who had stood in his presence, who had heard his words in that quiet room, the answer was clear. And yet, there was one more layer to come, a final surprise buried in the seams. Because late that night, as Amelia cleaned up after closing, she found a sealed envelope tucked beneath the old tailoring book Keanu used to read. It was addressed to her. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Amelia, you were never meant to be perfect, only present. You have the heart to lead because you know what it means to break. Don't lead with fear. Lead with the memory of your father's laugh, the scent of your favorite diner, the ache of the late shifts that made you stronger. Lead like someone who remembers what it's like to feel invisible and chooses every day to make others feel seen. Love doesn't wear logos. It wears warmth." Her hands trembled, tears blurred the ink, but there was no time to cry, because the world had just taken notice, and tomorrow people would arrive not for luxury, but to be heard. The return that wasn't announced, the boutique had changed. Not in its walls or its windows, not in the soft glow of its lights or the scent of sandalwood that still greeted people at the door. No, the change was quieter, slower, something that settled in like warmth after a long winter. It was in the way people entered, hesitant but hopeful. It was in the smiles exchanged between strangers, in the way clothes were no longer sold to impress, but offered to comfort. There were fewer cameras now, fewer reporters. The buzz had faded, but what remained was real. Every Friday afternoon, the open forum took place. Folding chairs were placed between racks of fine jackets and silk dresses. A small circle formed. People who had nothing to prove but everything to share. Stories poured out like forgotten music. A single mother talked about the night she walked away from her abusive husband with nothing but a backpack and her daughter's tiny shoes. A veteran described the fear of being invisible after coming home. A teenager in foster care tried on his first blazer and said he felt like someone worth listening to. Amelia stood at the center of it all, not as a manager, not as a leader, but as one of them. Her voice no longer trembled when she welcomed people. Her smile was no longer rehearsed. She spoke with honesty, dressed in the coat Keanu left her, the one with the word "seen" stitched beneath the collar. That single word had become her compass, but behind the beauty of what had grown, a storm was brewing, one that threatened everything they had built. It began with a letter from the city, a new zoning regulation. Someone had filed a formal complaint against the boutique, claiming it was operating as a community center without proper permits. The city warned that unless adjustments were made immediately, the store could be shut down for violating commercial use laws. At first, the staff panicked. Marie cried for the first time anyone had seen. Jason offered to give up his paycheck. Others started calling local lawyers and neighborhood groups. But the truth was, it didn't matter how noble their mission was. The paperwork didn't care about heart. It cared about boxes, signatures, and fees. Amelia sat alone in the back room late that night, the letter trembling in her hands. She wanted to believe everything would be okay. She wanted to believe kindness was enough. But the reality was harsh. Without help, the boutique had weeks left. She whispered into the quiet, "Where are you, Keanu?" The next morning came with a chill. The sky was gray, the wind restless. The boutique opened as usual, but the air was heavy. The regulars came in, noticing the tension. Whispers filled the corners of the store, and then, without warning, the bell above the door rang, and he stepped inside. Keanu Reeves. No cameras followed him, no entourage. He wore the same worn boots, the same quiet eyes. But when he walked through the boutique, people stepped aside, not in awe, but in respect, in recognition of someone who had planted something beautiful and left without asking for applause. Amelia looked up from the counter and froze. He walked straight to her. "Holding a thin folder, I heard," he said gently. She nodded, her throat tight. "It's bad." He handed her the folder. Inside were papers, legal, precise, already signed. "I bought the building next door. We'll extend the boutique's mission through a foundation. It'll act as the official community center. Fully licensed, protected." She blinked. You did this already? Before I left," he said softly. "I had a feeling we'd need more than just hope." Tears filled her eyes, but she laughed through them. "You always plan for things no one sees coming," he smiled. "Because that's what kindness is. It's preparation in the face of uncertainty." But he wasn't done. Later that afternoon, the boutique closed for a few hours, not for an emergency, but for something much bigger. Outside, a small podium was set up. A crowd gathered, not just neighbors, but people from the shelters, from the community kitchens, from the places the world forgets. And at the center stood Keanu, holding a microphone with the same quiet strength he always carried. "This store was never mine," he began. "It was always yours. It was built by my mother's hands, by your stories, by the belief that a person's worth cannot be measured in money or style, but in how they make others feel. Today, we turn this boutique into something more, a permanent home for dignity." He turned to Amelia, beckoning her forward. "And from now on, she will lead it." The crowd erupted in applause. Amelia stepped up, stunned, shaking, but smiling through her tears. "We won't sell you something to make you feel rich," she said. "We'll offer you something to remind you that you already are." In the crowd, Jason stood with Marie. Both were crying. Behind them, an old man who had once come in barefoot now wore polished shoes and a tie. He said made him feel like a professor, and among them all, unnoticed by most, stood Colin Hart. He didn't wear a flashy suit. He wore a simple jacket, a quiet face, and eyes filled with something he'd never shown before. Remorse. He didn't speak. He didn't approach. He simply stood there, listening, learning. Because sometimes, losing everything is what finally teaches you what matters. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline and golden light poured through the windows of the boutique, Keanu walked to the bookshelf one last time. He picked up the tailoring book, opened to the page he always loved, smiled, and then, without a word, he walked out. No headlines followed him, but his legacy stayed behind, in every coat gifted, in every story told, and in every person who left the boutique not just better dressed, but more deeply seen.